He began his reign with a blessing that few rulers in history could claim. While most kings sought armies, riches, or political advantage, this young monarch asked for something far more extraordinary: the wisdom to lead with justice and clarity. And because he chose understanding over power, he received a gift that would define an entire era. His insight became legendary, his decisions shaped nations, and his voice echoed through generations as a symbol of discernment guided from above. In today's story, we revisit that remarkable beginning not as a distant myth, but as a powerful lesson about leadership, humility, and the kind of choices that transform lives. Imagine standing at the threshold of immense responsibility, knowing that one request could change everything. Instead of demanding prosperity or victory, he chose the path of wisdom, and that single decision set the foundation for one of the most fascinating reigns ever recorded. As we explore his journey, you will see how wisdom can elevate a leader, how integrity can anchor a nation, and how a humble request can lead to a legacy that outlives empires. If you are drawn to stories that reveal the deeper layers of history, stories filled with insight, reflection, and meaning, this is the perfect place for you. Before we dive deeper into the unfolding events, take a moment to support the channel. Your like, share, and subscription help us bring more inspiring narratives to life and continue uncovering the timeless lessons hidden in the past. Thank you for being here. Now let us step into the beginning of a reign shaped not by force, but by wisdom. His reputation as a ruler touched by divine wisdom only grew as stories of his judgment spread across the ancient world. And nothing illustrated this more vividly than the dispute between the two mothers who came before him. Word traveled quickly that the young king, blessed with discernment beyond his years, had resolved a case that others would have abandoned in confusion, and the tale became a symbol of his extraordinary ability to see through the surface of human behavior. As travelers repeated the story along trade routes and scribes wove it into the memory of the kingdom, it blended seamlessly with the unfolding narrative of a reign defined not by conquest or intimidation but by clarity of thought, an uncommon empathy, and a commitment to justice shaped by his earlier plea for understanding rather than personal gain. His wisdom did not remain confined to the throne room. It found expression in the sayings and reflections that later generations preserved in collections of proverbs, and in the songs that carried his meditations on life, character, and human frailty. These writings formed a bridge between his private contemplation and his public duty, revealing a ruler who recognized the weight of power and the responsibility that came with insight. They also provided a window into a mind that sought patterns beneath complexity and harmony beneath conflict, allowing his people to glimpse the same clarity that guided his judgments. As his influence deepened, ambassadors and scholars traveled great distances to witness the king whose understanding set him apart from the rulers of surrounding nations, and the kingdom itself became a beacon of stability and learning. In this way, the famous judgment between the two mothers was not an isolated miracle of discernment, but a reflection of the broader character of his leadership. A moment that captured the essence of a life shaped by the gift he had asked for at the very beginning of his reign. The unity between his early devotion, his daily decisions, and his legacy of wisdom created a narrative that endured long after his lifetime, reminding future generations that true authority rests not in force or wealth but in the ability to seek truth with humility and to lead with insight sharpened by compassion. As the years unfolded, the wisdom that had defined Solomon's earliest judgments began shaping the wider destiny of his kingdom, extending far beyond the quiet chambers where he once listened to the pleas of ordinary people. The clarity of thought that guided his decisions became the same force driving the transformation of Israel into a thriving center of culture and wealth. And the nation gradually shifted from a regional monarchy into a power recognized along the major routes of trade and diplomacy. What had begun as the story of a young ruler gifted with discernment evolved into the story of a statesman who understood how insight could be woven into every corner of national life. Merchants carrying spices, textiles, and precious metals found new opportunities under his policies. And the flow of goods through Israel created ties with lands that had once seemed unreachable. The prosperity that followed was not merely a matter of gold and treasure, but a reflection of a king who recognized that stability, fairness, and order naturally drew cooperation from neighbors near and far. Architecture rose as another expression of his leadership, a physical counterpart to the intellectual and spiritual legacy he had already begun shaping. Stone by stone, he directed the construction of buildings that stood as symbols of a kingdom entering its golden era. These structures were more than showcases of wealth. They were monuments to a vision that sought permanence, harmony, and beauty, mirroring the harmony he had once sought within the people he governed. Travelers arriving at the capital walked among courtyards where artisans carved intricate designs, where the sound of chisels echoed through halls that blended craftsmanship with reverence. The city itself became a living testimony to the balance between power and wisdom, suggesting that greatness depended on a foundation deeper than ambition alone. The spread of Solomon's reputation across distant territories was as natural as the growth of the kingdom itself. And soon foreign rulers sent caravans, not simply to trade, but to witness the intellect behind Israel's flourishing. Among those drawn by the stories was the Queen of Sheba, whose journey across harsh landscapes reflected her determination to test whether the tales of his understanding had been exaggerated. Her arrival marked a pinnacle in the widening sphere of Israel's influence, and her presence in the court symbolized the degree to which Solomon's leadership had resonated beyond his borders. She came expecting grandeur, but the real object of her curiosity was the mind of the king, whose judgments and writings had captured the imagination of nations. When she finally met him, the encounter underscored how deeply his wisdom permeated every layer of the kingdom's life, from the splendor of the palace to the conduct of the officials who served under him. She observed not only his wealth but the structure, discipline, and harmony that defined his administration, and she recognized that such order could not be purchased or imitated. It had to be shaped from within, guided by a leader whose insight had long been the quiet engine driving Israel's ascent. Her astonishment became another thread in the tapestry of Solomon's legacy, a reminder that his greatness did not arise from force or empire, but from the same source that had guided his earliest decisions, a heart committed to understanding, and a reign defined by the capacity to build, to connect, and to elevate a nation through the power of wisdom. As the wealth of the kingdom expanded and the fame of Israel's ruler spread to the farthest corners of the known world, Solomon turned his attention to the fulfillment of a vision that had been entrusted to him long before the splendor of his court and the corridors of trade came to define his reign. It was the sacred mission of constructing the temple, a dwelling place for the divine presence in the heart of Jerusalem, that would become the crowning testament to a life dedicated not merely to earthly accomplishment, but to the alignment of mortal purpose with heavenly design. With meticulous care, he oversaw every detail, drawing upon the finest craftsmen from near and far, skilled artisans whose hands could shape cedar and stone into forms that reflected not only architectural mastery, but the deeper harmony of faith and devotion. Each column, each panel, each golden fixture was imbued with intent, chosen to honor the God who had granted him wisdom beyond measure. And in every decision he demonstrated that true greatness lay in marrying practical skill with reverent purpose. The temple rose like a beacon at the heart of the city, its presence transforming Jerusalem from a political capital into a spiritual center, drawing visitors, pilgrims, and emissaries alike to witness a marvel that was as much a testament to devotion as it was to human ingenuity. The dedication ceremony itself became a moment where heaven and earth seemed to converge, when the prayers of the people and the careful arrangement of sacred rites invited the divine to inhabit the space in a manner both visible and profound, as the glory of God filled the sanctuary, illuminating every intricate detail and reflecting off the polished surfaces of the sacred furnishings. Those present could sense that the vision had transcended mere stone and timber, becoming a living symbol of a covenant fulfilled through wisdom, obedience, and disciplined leadership. The atmosphere was charged with awe and reverence, a tangible acknowledgement that the blessings of divine favor were inseparable from the diligence and insight of a ruler committed to a higher purpose. Even as the kingdom prospered in trade, diplomacy, and architectural achievement, the completion of the temple reinforced the deeper narrative of Solomon's reign, reminding all who looked upon it that the pursuit of wealth and influence alone could not define true greatness. The temple was a physical manifestation of the same wisdom that had guided his earliest judgments, the clarity of mind that had distinguished him among kings, and the insight that had drawn the admiration of distant nations like the Queen of Sheba. In its halls, in the glow of the divine presence, one could trace the continuity of a life led with discernment and devotion, a seamless thread connecting the young king who had asked for understanding over riches to the mature monarch whose legacy would endure for generations. Through the temple, the story of Israel under Solomon became not only a chronicle of worldly success but a testament to the profound intersection of intellect, faith, and the capacity to shape a nation's destiny in accordance with divine purpose. A story that would echo in the hearts and imaginations of all who heard it, resonating across centuries as an enduring illustration of what is possible when wisdom and reverence are united in the hands of a single, extraordinary leader. Despite the grandeur of the temple, the brilliance of his court, and the far-reaching influence of his kingdom, Solomon's later years were shadowed by choices that betrayed the very wisdom that had made him great, revealing a complexity in the human heart that even the most enlightened mind cannot fully escape. The alliances he forged through marriage, once intended to strengthen Israel's diplomatic and political position, gradually became a source of spiritual compromise, as the foreign wives he welcomed brought with them the customs, rituals, and deities of distant lands, each with its own sacred traditions and appeals that subtly, and then overtly, drew the king's attention away from the covenant that had guided his rise to prominence. What began as an effort to secure peace and unity among neighboring nations slowly gave way to indulgence in practices that were expressly forbidden, and the very wisdom that had once discerned justice in the most challenging human disputes seemed, in these matters of the heart, to falter under the weight of desire and accommodation. The high places of worship for foreign gods, erected in the hills and valleys of the kingdom, became symbols not of cultural curiosity or political prudence, but of spiritual disobedience. Each shrine a reminder that even a monarch blessed with extraordinary understanding could stumble when the temptations of comfort, curiosity, and attraction were allowed to override the principles upon which his authority and legacy had been built. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. The king whose judgments had inspired awe among his people, and whose writings had been celebrated for insight, now allowed practices that compromised the very unity and holiness of the nation he had governed so effectively. The splendor of the temple, once a beacon of divine favor, now contrasted starkly with the clandestine and open devotion to other gods that proliferated across Israel, revealing a tension between earthly accomplishment and spiritual fidelity that could not be ignored. Advisors and observers, who had long marveled at Solomon's discernment in matters of state and law, now witnessed the vulnerability of even the wisest human mind to passion and external influence. And the people of Israel saw in their king a cautionary tale, that wisdom alone, no matter how profound, could be insufficient to safeguard against the subtle erosion of moral and spiritual integrity when choices are guided by desire rather than principle. Even as the kingdom retained its wealth, its international prestige, and the awe-inspiring legacy of architectural and literary achievement, the turn toward idolatry marked a fissure in the story of Solomon's reign, reminding all who studied his life that greatness is inseparable from responsibility, and that the blessings of insight, power, and divine favor carry with them an obligation to remain steadfast in the values that earned them. The high places of foreign gods, the quiet compromises in ritual and devotion, and the distractions of a heart divided between allegiance to God and the allure of worldly entanglements collectively shaped a narrative that was instructive as it was tragic, illustrating that the measure of a leader is not only found in the splendor of accomplishments, but in the consistency with which wisdom is applied to both the grand and the intimate dimensions of life. Thus, the story of Solomon, who had once embodied the pinnacle of discernment, becomes a layered chronicle, one of remarkable achievement intertwined with human fallibility, a legacy that celebrates brilliance while simultaneously warning of the perils inherent in neglecting the very principles that sustain it, and a tale whose resonance endures across generations as both inspiration and caution, showing that even the greatest among us are subject to the consequences of choices that deviate from the path of righteousness and enduring wisdom. As Solomon's life drew toward its final years, the weight of his choices became increasingly evident, and the very blessings that had once defined his reign now stood as reminders of opportunities squandered, despite the clear warnings from God, twice delivered through prophets and divine messages. Solomon's heart remained ensnared by the allure of foreign influences and personal indulgences, illustrating that even a mind graced with unparalleled wisdom is not immune to the persistent tug of temptation. The prosperity of his kingdom, the grandeur of the temple, and the fame that had reached distant lands could not shield him from the consequences of disobedience. And slowly, the foundations of the empire he had built with such care began to show cracks that would widen after his passing. The decline that followed was not sudden but a gradual unraveling, as the unity of Israel fractured and internal strife grew, a direct reflection of the spiritual compromise that had taken root in the heart of its leader. What had begun as acts of political strategy, marriages to foreign princesses, and alliances with distant nations, transformed into a web of idolatry and distraction. And the divine favor that had once guided Solomon's judgments and illuminated his writings was now withheld, leaving the kingdom vulnerable to both internal and external pressures. In this, Solomon's story serves as a profound lesson. Wisdom and blessing alone are insufficient without steadfast adherence to the principles that sustain them. And even the most extraordinary human achievements can be undermined by choices that drift from integrity and obedience. Yet, Solomon's life is not remembered solely for its decline. It is also a testament to the heights of human potential and the transformative power of insight when aligned with purpose. His writings, songs, and reflections continue to inspire, offering guidance, encouragement, and illumination to all who seek understanding. The temple he built remains a symbol of devotion and vision, a lasting monument to the possibilities that emerge when talent, dedication, and divine guidance converge. The cautionary elements of his story, his fall into idolatry, and the subsequent weakening of his kingdom stand in stark contrast to his accomplishments, creating a narrative that is both inspirational and instructive, a dual legacy of brilliance and humility before higher principles. As we reflect on Solomon's life, let us remember the balance that it teaches, the interplay of wisdom, responsibility, and obedience, and the awareness that choices carry consequences that extend far beyond our personal ambitions. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the remarkable life of Solomon, a story of divine favor, unparalleled wisdom, extraordinary achievement, human vulnerability, and enduring lessons. If you enjoyed this exploration and want to uncover more incredible stories from history, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an insight that brings the past to life. Your support helps keep these stories alive and inspires us to continue sharing knowledge that enlightens, captivates, and connects us all across time.